the guys who actually defended us, or rather defended the editors. I personally was not charged in court. The distinguished human rights lawyer, Mr. Geoffrey Robertson. Take it away and burn it.
Well, first of all, I should explain that I'm here as a substitute for my dear old friend Felix Dennis, who died last month. We'd worked together for 40 years, and I lack one of his qualifications, and I was not in the dock at the Old Bailey, though I did work on Oz magazine. Oz magazine came to London in 1967, which was the year that the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper, and the year that I scored my first acid trip in the bar in LSE. The magazine started off as a satirical student magazine in Australia, but in 1966, Richard Neville, Jim Anderson and Martin Sharp decided they needed a bigger pond. They moved it to London, which was becoming the centre of the international counterculture alongside San Francisco and Amsterdam. And they found the bigger pond, they found a rock and roll business. They came in and they did the issue, which was issue 28. One of the things that they did was what nowadays would be called a mashup. They took one of Robert's cartoons and they spliced the head of Rupert the Bear, who was a very wholesome family cartoon from the Daily Express, onto the body of a particularly rampant and well-endowed character of Robert's. That cartoon caught the eye of the law. The Oz officers were raided, the editors were arrested, and so began the longest obscenity trial in British legal history to that point. And sitting here we have the man who defended them in that trial, eventually got them out of jail. So, Charles, how did you and the other kids know each other at all before you saw that issue of Oz?
Well, I rounded up a posse of kids from my school and a nearby girls' school, and going, this looks like fun, let's go. I mean, technically, I think it said something about 18 and under, but I was prepared to lie about my age. I was about to turn 19, but I thought this is a good way to avoid having to become a librarian or a civil servant. And I'd graduated from reading rock papers to reading the underground press, and from as far as I could gather, what these guys in London were doing was leading the sort of life I thought I should be leading. They were causing plenty of inventive cultural trouble. They appeared to have attractive girlfriends, and they were taking a metric fuck ton of drugs. And I thought, I'd like some of that. So I said, hey, let's go up, let's do this. And we all ended up in Richard Neville's basement in Palace Gardens Terrace. And met all our contemporaries and those a bit younger who'd come for pretty much the same reasons we did, and met the Oz editors. I recall Richard as being very loose and charming and floppy-haired, and I guess it shouldn't come as any surprise many years later that he was played on the TV adaptation by a young Hugh Grant. Jim Anderson was very tall, very skinny, with lank blonde hair, and resembled a sort of comparatively healthier version of Johnny Winter. He was the first out gay man I'd ever met. And then there was Felix, the freak with a briefcase in his chocolate brown pinstripe suit, with his Charles II hair and pirate's beard and deafening guffaw. And the key thing was that, contrary to what the legal establishment attempted to make out later, you know, they didn't attempt to force us into doing, saying or writing anything. They were genuinely interested in what we want to do. Is that how you remember it, Dan?
Vividly. I remember that brown suit. I remember Felix, who strangely had an episode at the same school that I had previously been at. He claimed to be expelled. Of course, he wasn't an editor in those days. He was the advertising salesman. That's why he had the suit.
And the reviews editor. Yeah, the business manager.
I suppose I remember it being something that you went to really lightly. It seemed so benign. It was a very sunny summer in London. And it seemed so shocking when this very light thing suddenly turned into this really horrible thing of people being sent to jail, of school kids being lined up either to give evidence against or for them. It just seemed so unlikely. It just seemed so different from what we were expecting, I suppose. It was only a magazine, and yet it produced all those insights into Britain. I think one of the most shocking things was the judge who suggested that Felix will get a shorter sentence than the others because he hadn't been to university. The other thing that also genuinely, in my innocence, shocked me was, of course, the reaction to young women who saw that issue and were horrified by what was seen as being a gross piece of sexism. And that's also part of the climate. I mean, the words jailbait have a rather different tenor these days, don't they?
Jeff, what were they actually charged with?
Well, they were charged, the book was thrown at them, they were charged, would you believe, with conspiracy to corrupt public morals by debauching the morals of young children within the realm. And that was the first charge, and that carried life imprisonment. Seriously, and they would have gone to jail for many, many years if they'd been convicted of that. And our great success, our great thing during the trial was to have them acquitted of that. Then there was obscenity, which was a charge that this magazine depraved and corrupted those likely to read it. And thirdly, there was the pathetic little charge of sending an indecent magazine through the post. So this was, but there was more to it than that. The magazine actually had been, the first complaint to the police, the only complaint to the police, was from the General Secretary of the National Union of Teachers, because this had been found passing around. But it was, that receded because that wasn't the reason they were prosecuted. This was 1971. This was almost revenge for the 60s in the 70s under a new Conservative government. You have to understand that part of the corruption of the time was the police force. The Obscene Publications Squad, the Dirty Squad, was dealing pornography by arrangement with the Soho pornographers. You could get the most extreme pornography just by asking in Soho, because Paul Raymond and others were paying off the police. The Drug Squad was dealing drugs, and the Serious Crime Squad was setting up serious crime. Scotland Yard was utterly corrupt before Robert Mark came in 73, and as a result, the 18 members of the Dirty Squad were all sent to prison, convicted of running a massive protection racket in Soho. These were the people who then raided Oz. I'll never forget, in Berwick Street, they walked up 3 rickety blocks of stairs to knock on the door of the garret of Nasty Tales and arrest 3 stoned cartoonists who they dragged to trial just after Oz. So this war on the underground press was partly, as far as the police were concerned, to protect their cover. They were protecting and making enormous amounts of money from the most desolatingly ugly porn that was being sold in Soho, and yet to pretend to Lord Longford and Mary Whitehouse and the politicians of the time that they were actually doing something. They were starting these prosecutions for conspiracy of the underground press. And in the summer of 1971, we were all there in the Old Bailey. And the three main exhibits were, firstly, Robert's Rupert the Bear. Yes, modified by Viv Berger by putting the much-loved iconic nursery figure of Rupert on the head of the bear. And this was, I think, something touched the British establishment. We couldn't get a QC to defend this magazine. The Labour QC MP, who had been originally briefed, 11 days before the trial actually opened his brief, saw that and refused to act. Then I went to Basil Wiggett, who defended Rudi Deutschka, a really brilliant liberal reputation. He accepted, had a conference, at which Jim Anderson, I think, mentioned possibly the Chicago conspiracy trial, throwing something in court. And he ran up a few hours later and said he couldn't take the risk. Couldn't take the risk of not becoming chairman of Booper's, I think. And so we were there, poured on the Friday before the trial started on Monday, without a QC. So Richard and I heard that John Mortimer was defending an axe murderer in the Old Bailey. He was having lunch with his very young companion, 22 years, whom he later married. And so we plucked up courage and we took the magazine down to the restaurant and opened it to show him Rupert. He giggled. He actually giggled, and when so did his companion. And so he said, oh goody, can I defend? I just have to finish my ex-murderer. The bloodstains aren't running our way. So that is how we did at least get a defender. I wasn't a counsel, I was a student at Oxford actually, who'd written for Oz in Australia and was writing a thesis on conspiracy to corrupt public morals. So we then began this extraordinary 6-week trial, which featured some of the greatest intellects in the country as defence witnesses. We had the Oxford Professor of Jurisprudence, Ronnie Dworkin. We had Professor Hans Einzig, the leading psychiatrist, Edward de Bono, Marty Feldman, Felix Topolsky, who came forward to defend Robert's work. We had John Peel, who we had to call to defend Shaar Murray, who'd written a review that mentioned, I think, the word fuck music, and was grilled in the Old Bailey by the prosecution counsel. Have you ever heard of a symphony by Beethoven be inducing an orgasm? To which John said, in his natural way, he said, well, I haven't, but if I wrote music, I'd like to think someone was making love to. I noticed you used making love instead of fuck. Why is that? Well, John said, I've used making love because I'm in a courtroom. But since everyone else is saying fuck, then I'll say it too. And, Charles's review was put to some psychiatrist. Said, what do you think about using this fuck music? And the psychiatrist said, well, I think Shakespeare put it rather better, didn't he?
Yeah, I was only young.
And so it went on and provided entertainment for many until over 6 weeks, as I say, of the summer. And constantly, it was packed. It was like a theatre because all the American lawyers would come, and we had characters like George Melly, the great George Melly, who was, I remember Judge Argyle leaning over to him and saying, for the benefit of those of us without a classical education, what do you mean by this word cunnilingus? Pronouncing it like it was a cock medicine. George beamed. He thought he made connection here. He said, "Oh, my lord, I'm so sorry. I've been inhibited by the architecture. Sucking or blowing, going down or gobbling. In my naval days, your lordship, we called it yodeling in the canyon." "This is a courtroom, not a theatre," was the judge's constant. He used to look at Rupert's erections through a magnifier. Like, seriously, when I did a play, which was actually verbatim transcripts, it was first put on by the great late Buzz Goodbody at the Royal Shakespeare Company at the Place, and with the judge, I think Leslie Phillips played him, and I said to Buzz, "Look, you've taken out my direction to have the judge look at Rupert's erection through a magnifying glass." And she said, "Yes," she said, "I have." I said, "But that happened." And she said, "It happened in court, but in a theatre, the public won't believe." So there were extraordinary events, many of them, and it was an extraordinary time. The jury acquitted on the conspiracy to corrupt public morals charge, which was an enormous relief, because Argyle was mad and would have sent them down for many years. They convicted on the obscenity charge, which I was quite happy with, because the judge was an idiot and actually had given them the wrong direction on obscenity. He said obscenity meant indecency, which it doesn't in law, so we were confident we had that in the bag. And they convicted, of course, on indecency, which we expected, so which wasn't a serious offence. So then, would you believe, the judge decided to remand them in prison for psychiatric examination. They were stark, staring sane, and yet here they were, like in Russia at the time, being carted off to prison to have their heads read, but more than that, to have their heads shaven. It suddenly, the Daily Mail discovered and did a front page. This is all front page stuff. About 3 million people were being killed in the genocide in Bangladesh at this very time. It was all Oz trial. There were more letters to the Times about the Oz trial than there had been about the Suez crisis. But what was really hit the headlines was the fact that they were having their head short, because they all had long hair, of course, hippie style. And so the cultural collision that was the Oz trial it seemed to be summed up in this atavistic prison policy that the minute you got into prison you had your hair shaved off. And so it was a nervous time. They spent a week in prison before we got them out on bail, and inevitably won the appeal because the judge had misdirected the jury 78 times. And so it had a happy ending, unless you think that its very first beneficiary, a few weeks after we had won the appeal, we had won freedom. I mean, Lady Chatterley trial, freedom for great art. Oz trial, freedom for transgressive, schoolboy art for trying, art for not so great art, but for sincere and satirical art. And the very first beneficiary of the Oz, the law that we changed, the Oz appeal, was Rupert Murdoch and Page 3, which appeared in the wake of the Oz acquittal. Made it all work
Am I right in thinking that the prosecution never suggested at any point that the Oz editors had abused the school children?
No, there was no evidence of that.
No, but in today's climate of moral panic over Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris, that would be the first thing they would have suggested. I mean, in a way, isn't the clock being turned back right now from what was gained by the Oz trial?
Well, that's interesting. I think that at least the Oz trial and in the 70s, as I say, Lady Chatterley in 1960 had been the point at which great art was protected from the obscenity laws. The Oz trial was the point at which not so great art, but genuine art was protected, and it was not till the end of the 1970s John and I defended again a shabby little book called Inside and Into Lovelace. The judge said to the jury, members of the jury, if this book isn't obscene, I don't know what is. And they came back and acquitted after a while. And the DPP announced that he wouldn't prosecute the written word again. So we did have that achievement, I guess, by the end of the 70s. But now, yes, we do have witch hunts. We do have people who are being kept, like Paul Gambaccini, arrested, and then nothing happens for years. And they lose their job, and then there's a terrible state of suspense in relation to evidence which is completely non-existent, virtually. So there is a sense of proportion that we've got to keep while realizing that you have to go after these people. And in my time, in the 70s, I remember in the next case we thought we'd killed off, conspiracy to corrupt public morals, but it was brought back for an organisation called PI. And I remember the most active member of PI in the committal proceedings was not, and the one who wrote the most obscene stuff about child molesting, was a guy they pretended his name was Mr. Henderson. And the magistrate was Richard Branson's father, a very, very fair, firm, and principled London magistrate. And if he had known that this was really perverting the course of justice, that the most active member of this organisation on the evidence before the court was not Mr. Henderson, that was the pseudonym for Sir Peter Hayman, who was the deputy director of MI6. So there you are. There was a real element of corruption and cover-up in the courts at that time. And Oz, by taking on courageously, because they were up against a prison sentence, by dressing up as schoolgirls during the committal proceedings, by calling everyone from George Melly to Marty Feldman, who had a terrible row with the judge. And as he went out, he said to Richard and the doc, pointing at the judge, he said, "Boring old fart." And this was overheard by a Times reporter who reported it on page 1 of the Times. And he said afterwards, Richard said that when they got to prison, they were terrified that because of the way the tabloids had played the trial, that they might be beaten up as if they were pedophiles. But they found themselves celebrated. They were rather prison royalty, entirely because Marty Feldman called Judge Argyle, who was the most savage of all sentences, a boring old fart. He was the recorder of Birmingham, and whenever anyone vandalised a telephone box in Birmingham, he'd send them down for 3 years on the grounds that, as he would say, we don't do this sort of thing in Birmingham. Which they didn't, but they did it in Coventry. Telephone box vandalism hit the roof in Coventry.
Did you ask for Tunstons?
He did, yes. No, that was Malcolm Stevenson. He was in the horror.
Charles, do you think you could tell us a little bit about the way the music business came behind the Oz people during the trial?
Well, Oz and IT, International Times, the other main underground publication, Oz was a magazine, IT was a newspaper, were in a symbiotic relationship with the rock business, because essentially they depended on the rock business for advertising revenue lifeblood. and the rock business liked to channel, you know, certain of its what they consider to be its more adventurous acts towards the hippies, who were the vast majority of the readers of the magazine. And with the advent of the Oz trial, the magazine suddenly got an offer of help from what was probably the single greatest rock and roll luminary in the country, John Lennon. And he said, right, I'm going to do a benefit record to, you know, to raise support and funds for Oz. And here's what we're going to do. You know that, you know the mansion that's in the Imagine video. You know, Lennon had a studio there, and he said, right, I'm going to write the song. Phil Spector's going to produce it. Ringo's going to play the drums, and Yoko is going to do whatever Yoko does. And Klaus Voormann was going to play the bass, and the deal was, right, anybody in the Oz posse who plays an instrument, thinks they can play an instrument, or just wants to shake a bit of percussion a discrete distance away from the mic, and thinks they can sing a backing vocal at least a quarter in tune, you know, here's where the van's leaving from. And I was thinking, right, I'll have a bit of this. Felix had actually been a drummer in one of his many previous incarnations, so he was, you know, a natural to be in the percussion section. Richard and Jim sort of sang and sort of played percussion, and you know, I volunteered to play some guitar. And you know, we got there, and you know, it was a long drive up the drive. You know, this is not a little suburban place. You know, we're talking rock broker belt, we're talking mansion, we're talking place that you probably had to be an international criminal to have afforded in previous times. There was Lennon, you know, in top to toe Levi's. Led us into this wonderfully well appointed, small but perfectly formed studio. Behind the drums was the small but perfectly formed Ringo. In the control room was the small and not really perfectly formed Phil Spector. And you know, Lennon basically decided who was going to pretend to play what. And you know, I had my eye on some of the legendary electric guitars on the wall. You know, there was the you know, one of the 3/4 size Rickenbackers. There was the Let It Be, you know, the rooftop concert Epiphone, and it was like, and Lennon saying, right, we're starting with acoustic guitars. So I got one of those Gibson J160Es that they bought from the music shop in Liverpool in 1962, and Lennon started showing everybody the song, and it had this introduction which involved a particular occurrence of a first position D chord, and I thought, right, get clever. We were sort of sitting cross-legged with microphones coming down like this, and I thought, right, I'm going to show him I know what I'm doing. So I did this little augmented thing at the 3rd fret, and he was, none of them cheap folk club tricks in here, Murray. And I thought, oh my God, John Lennon knows my name. And a little later on, I actually broke a string. I was so nervous. And legendary Beatles roadie Mal Evans was hanging around, and Lennon said, "Not to worry, we'll see if we can get Mal to change the string." like he wouldn't change the string if he was asked. Then, still nervous, played the wrong chord. Lennon stops the take. I thought, okay, this is where the legendary John Lennon viperish scorn is dumped on my teenage head. But he said, no, let's do it again, I made a mistake. He took responsibility for the mistake, even though he knew quite well that I played it. Later on, when there was actually a basic track down, I was saying, don't you think this needs some electric guitars on it now? He was like, all right, Nobby, back in your box. And then when the record finally came out, all those acoustic guitars had been taken off, electric guitars had been put on. I thought, bloody rock stars, bloody John Lennon, bloody Phil Spector, they should have listened to me. But the guy I really felt sorry for was the guy who'd been brought along to sing lead vocals. His lead vocal was taken off and replaced by somebody who Lennon knew, who none of us had ever heard of. And the punchline was that they took so long to mix it that by the time it actually came out, the trial was over.
Defended your work, or defended the Rupert Bear cartoon, and he got into a long controversy with the prosecutor over whether it was art. The question went, is art, is Rupert, as he appears in the Rupert Annual, is that art? No, it's not. Is art, but so just putting the head of the bear onto Mr. Crumb's drawing, does that make it art? Yes. What sort of art does it make it? Satirical art. And so it went on and on like this, but we spent several days defending your artistic merit, because that was the defence. You could run to an obscenity charge, you could call experts.
When you have to explain satire to people, you know, they just don't get it, they never get it. And they get it or they don't, and actually very few people really enjoy satire. It's kind of special.
Well, it was very difficult, because with Felix Topolsky had difficulty explaining what was art and what wasn't. It's the sort of question that cross-examiner can tie you up in. But we had pulled Edward de Bono, and the cross-examination went, he was the lateral thinking expert, and cross-examination went, Mr. de Bono, why do you think Rupert is equipped with such a large size organ? To which she said, I'm sorry, I'm not very up to date with bears. What size do you think would be natural? The judge said, you must not ask counsel questions. And so this was the kind of dialogue that we could day in and day out. British experts. But this was a period of political repression. I mean, the miners were starting to strike. There were 3 days a week we were in darkness. And it's often forgotten that the 60s, while we look back on them as the flower power era, were actually very repressive.
A lot of assassinations in the US.
Well, in Britain, the police were throwing bricks on protesters against the Greek embassy, and they were leading suspects.
The Vietnam War, the huge Vietnam demonstrations in Grosvenor Square.
But you know, those underground papers we used to, on paste up night, people just take LSD. Hey, the colors, let's put some more color on it. And just become incoherent. Kind of.
Orange reversed out of red, yeah.
And like here's this red type with this blue drawing be printed behind it. It's horrible. What the hell's going on half the time?
Richard Neville used to say, if you can't read it, you're too old. Then he confessed that being over 30, he couldn't read all of it himself.
All these papers were kind of long-winded. They had long tirades about, you know, the establishments. They weren't very well written often. Like I said, it was.
There was some, I mean, it is normal to see in obscenity trials, they'll take the worst example, or the least good example. I mean, Lady Chatterley was perhaps Lawrence's worst books, and Oz 28 was perhaps the least impressive. And Oz had a number, it had Robert Hughes, it had Germaine Greer, they wrote extraordinary pieces, and of course Martin Sharp's cartoons, Charles's precocious music reviews.
Yeah, but I only came in with this one, Oz 28, but afterwards Felix said, do you want to stick around and do more stuff? And, I thought I was being sent, having had my little adventure, that, I was going to be sent back to the
18 years old.
sent back to the provinces to rot. But, really what I laughingly referred to as my career started with this.
There you go.
And could I have your reviewer just find the phrase?